It's Rachel. I'm Public Affairs and National Programmes Officer at the Foundation. You should have just got a little message saying recording in progress, and you just click got it, and that should be fine as long as you're happy for us to be recording. Feel free to turn off your video if you'd rather not be on the recording. So we're here to talk about local elections today. We're going to start just with a quick couple of questions, a quick poll to get a sense of where we're all starting from. So there's two questions, there's no wrong answers. It's completely anonymous, so I can't see who's said what. It's just to get a sense of where we're starting from. So there's a question about has your charity ever supported someone to register to vote in an election? And then there'll be a second question as well, and we'll just give it a minute. So we've got a few people who have supported someone to register to vote. That's great, but most people don't know or said no, which is absolutely fine because that's what we're here for today. So we've got one more question. How strong is your charity's relationships with local councillors? So 1 being you've got no relationship with local councillors at all, and 5 being you work really closely with them, very strategic. They know everything you do, and you can kind of come to them with any issues or problems or questions. We'll just have a quick look at those results. So there's quite a spread there actually. So some people have got no relationships, others have got really, really close, strong relationships, and quite a few in the middle. So that's good. We've got lots of different experiences in the room to share. Great. So I'm going to share my screen. Great. Okay. So like we said, we're here to talk about local elections today. A quick run through of what we'll cover. So we'll talk about what local elections are happening in May, why they matter for small local charities, how you can support people to engage in those, to vote, what you can get out of building relationships with councillors and during these elections. And then we're going to look at what this can look like in practice, and we're going to speak to Ben from My Life, My Choice later on, who's going to talk a bit about the work that My Life, My Choice does, to give you some inspiration of what that can look like in practice. And then we will have a chance to discuss in groups and share some ideas and set some actions as well. So first of all, what elections are happening in May? So local councillors are being elected in May in lots of places across England and Wales. So across Wales, in London boroughs, and in lots of other local authorities across England. In some places, this will be all the councillors are up for election this year, and in other places it might just be, for example, a third each year. If there's anyone in South Yorkshire, there's also a Metro Mayor election happening there. If you're not sure what's happening in your area, you can go to the Electoral Commission website and you just put in your postcode and it will tell you what elections are coming up locally. So why do those elections matter? So obviously councillors set the kind of political direction of the decisions that are made in your local authority, and local authorities have powers over a range of different services such as adult social care, children's services, housing, planning, public health, and there's a bit of a breakdown there on the side that will just kind of gives you a bit of a demonstration of where councils spend their money. So obviously adult and child social care being the largest, but also areas like housing and planning and transport. So these are all things that will affect your area. And if you want to know a bit more about local authorities and the powers that they have, there's a really useful guide on New Local's website, which is where this diagram is from. So why do these local elections matter to small charities? So for two reasons. So supporting people in your community to get their voice heard by voting, by sharing their experiences with decision makers, but also as a charity building relationships with those decision makers, councillors, to champion your issues and shape policy and the environment that you're working in as well. And I should say, actually, don't need to worry about taking notes or anything like that, because we have a very helpful guide that we will send around afterwards that has all the kind of resources and links and information from today's session in it as well. So why does it matter that people can vote, and what role can your charity play? So voting is a way that you can get your voice heard locally. It's also a way of kind of exercising your power and agency. And I'm sure that, you know, as charities, you'll often be working with people who don't always feel that they have a lot of power and agency, perhaps in their life or locally. And so it can be a really important opportunity to get their voice heard. It just sometimes needs a bit of thought about what barriers exist that might stop people from accessing the chance to vote, and how you can help to overcome those. And it might even be something that you can just incorporate into your kind of regular activities in the next few weeks. So for example, as part of a drop-in session or a social group, you could do some work on registering to vote. So you have to be registered in order to vote in the elections. It's a fairly simple process that you can do on the government website. The deadline for registering to vote in the elections in May is Thursday, the 14th of April. Anyone can register to vote if they're over 18 on the day of the election, or over 16 in Wales, if they're registered at an address in the area that they want to vote in, and they're not legally excluded, and are a British citizen or fit into one of these other categories of people who can qualify to vote. So there are some other kind of additional challenges which can get in the way of people registering to vote, but there are ways of getting around them. So for example, it might be necessary for someone to register anonymously. So anyone can ask for their details to be hidden on the electoral register, but it is also possible to register anonymously if you're concerned about your safety. For example, someone who's living in a refuge at the moment, there's a process on the government website where they can download a form to do that. And part of that, they will need evidence, and that can be given by relevant professionals, such as a manager of a refuge, which might be your charity, or a doctor or a midwife. You can also still register to vote even if you don't have a permanent address. So for example, if someone is homeless or residential in mental health treatment, or part of the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community, you just need to fill in a declaration of local interest form, which your charity can help them to do. And there's more information about that on the Electoral Commission website. And as I said, all these links are in the guides that we will send around afterwards. There are also lots of resources to support people with a learning disability to vote, including an easy read guide, and we'll be talking a bit more about that later. It's also worth noting that the Mental Capacity Act doesn't apply to voting, which means that, for example, someone who's detained under the Mental Health Act, or for example, an individual with dementia, has just as much right to vote as anyone else. They just need to register like everyone else. It's also worth thinking about, once people are registered to vote, what barriers there might be to actually voting on the day. So there's a couple of other options. So a postal vote, you just have to register in advance, so by the 19th of April, or voting by proxy. So you can nominate someone, a trusted person, to vote on your behalf if you know that you're not going to be able to do that on polling day. and you can apply up to 6 days before the election, so that will be kind of end of April this year. And you can also arrange for emergency proxy voting too, on the day of the election. For example, if you got COVID and didn't want to go to the polling station, that is also possible. So I guess the other side of engaging in local elections is around relationships. As charities providing frontline support, you have really valuable insight to share, so that local councillors can understand how to champion your interests in local government and more generally. You know, if there's particular issues that you want your local councillor or mayor to understand, obviously you can engage with them at any time of year, but elections can be when they're most likely to say yes. So what is useful? Why is it useful to build relationships with local councillors? So one side of it is that they can champion your charity's issues or get a response to things that you're raising. So for example, by asking questions or raising concerns in your local authority, sitting on committees, scrutinising decision making, or it might be that you've been raising an issue for ages and haven't got a response, and they can kind of help to move that along. They can also broker other relationships, so they'll be well connected to other decision makers, to organisations and businesses. They can help build profiles. So for example, if you invited them along to your events and you wanted some press, they might be able to provide some quotes or help to secure some kind of media coverage of that. Casework, councillors do casework, which is something that people aren't always aware of. Where they provide support and advocacy for individuals affected by local decisions. So for example, I know someone who recently was having a problem with their leaky roof, and they raised it with a housing association locally and weren't getting much of a response, and a councillor got involved with some casework and was able to kind of help them out on moving that forward. Also potentially funding opportunities and wider influence. So for example, some councillors have a kind of community chest type grant pot, or they will also have kind of connections to other wider agencies that you might be interested in influencing. So it's worth, if you're thinking about getting in touch with councillors, just having a think about what you want to achieve and what is within their remit to kind of help with that. So what's your aim? How is your work impacted by their decision making? Like I mentioned about casework, who within your organisation might be interested in meeting a councillor? Is your mayor likely to change, and do they understand the work that you do? And it might be that, you know, it looks as though some of you already have relationships with councillors, which is great. If not, it's worth having a think about how to approach that initial contact. So definitely emphasise the links that your charity has with their ward or the borough that they represent. Is that where you're based? Do you provide services there? Are you working with people in that community? It might sound a little bit crass, but talk numbers, because they are competing for votes. How many staff and volunteers and service users do you have? How many people have you helped to register to vote? That can be a particularly useful thing to share if it's a marginal seat. And other relevant information if you're meeting someone, for example, are you trying to get the press to come along to that meeting? Are there other community leaders or people that you're supporting who are going to be there? Is this an issue that you know they care about? If you're planning an action around engaging councillors, again, we're thinking about what you want to get out of it and how to get a reaction. Who is it specifically that you're targeting? Really importantly, what's your ask? So you want a really clearly defined, specific and realistic ask, and it might be that is that you want them to attend your AGM or meet every 6 months, put you in touch with someone, or something kind of bigger or more specific than that. And it's worth having a think about the kind of the best and worst case scenarios of how they might respond to that ask. You also want it to be something that will really show your charity at its best. It doesn't have to be a formal meeting if that's not what you do. It could be visiting one of your existing activities, or even something fun or light-hearted that will be quite memorable. So think about how you want to show yourself to them. It can also be a really good development opportunity for people within your organisation to help develop their leadership. So whether that's staff or volunteers or service users, having that chance to share their experiences and be listened to and taken on board by people with that kind of formal power can be really useful opportunity. And then just thinking about next steps, how does it fit into your kind of broader strategy, and making sure that you follow up. So for example, you might have engaged with someone during the election period and then get in touch to, you know, congratulate them on being elected and remind them of what they committed to keep up that engagement. So the Charity Commission sets out how charities can campaign, both in the run up to elections and outside of it. It is totally within a charitable remit to campaign and to engage with candidates at elections. Charities are totally fine to campaign on the issues that they're there to champion. Charities can advocate for change in law or policy or decision making or existing law to be implemented, if that's within the purposes of your charity. You might have heard about the Lobbying Act that sets out rules on how charities can engage in the run-up to general elections, but unless you're spending more than £20,000 in England or £10,000 in Wales on campaigning in a general election, you shouldn't need to register. But there is some useful resources on Bond's website and on the Charity Commission if you want to find out more. Some general rules about how to engage in an election as a charity. You have to be impartial. You can't endorse any particular candidates or promote the policies of any particular candidates. You can help people to register to vote, but you can't tell them who to vote for. And you can't be seen to be doing any of the above. So for example, you can't, if you invited just one candidate to an event, you might be seen as endorsing them by default, even if you're not necessarily saying vote for this person. It's also just worth being aware that staff and other representatives of your charity don't share their own political views while they're representing the charity, particularly on social media, not sharing anything that could be seen as endorsing a particular candidate or party on any channel where your job or employer is also listed, just to be on the safe side. And it's useful to have a kind of social media policy for your organisation to help address this. None of this should stop you from engaging with candidates at an election. Still a really good opportunity. Right, so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to introduce Ben, who is a trustee of My Life, My Choice. They are a self-advocacy organisation based in Oxfordshire, whose vision is a world where people with learning disabilities are treated without prejudice and are able to have choice and control over their own lives. They're independent and user-led, and they do some really fantastic work in influencing change locally. So ensuring people have a voice in elections, but also more generally influencing change in Oxfordshire. So Ben is a trustee, and I'm going to have a chat about some of the things that they do, which can give you a bit of an insight and inspiration into what some of this looks like in practice. So Ben, I think one of the places that would be good to start is what did you do in the 2019 election to help people understand how to register to vote?
We did an easy read version of how to register to vote because a lot of our members couldn't understand the ordinary version, and we helped to break down the key information. That's
great. And how did it help people? Were they able to then register to vote because of the easy read guide?
Well, it made it easier there because we used photo symbols and put it in like a really simple language.
Yeah.
So you can understand what they had to do when they actually didn't, because I think most of the people would have done it online, I think.
Yeah. Great. And I know that at My Life, My Choice, you have self-advocacy groups. What do you do in self-advocacy groups?
Well, we have groups for different parts of Oxfordshire, and like a women's group, and we got a young person's group, and we give them topics to talk about, training and having healthy lives and eating well and going for the health checks. And we also pick up on issues members might have. Sometimes we take these to our champions campaign group, like health checks, or for people who are wanting to get further up the waiting list of our current We Can't Wait campaign.
Great. And what does the champions group do?
The champions group, they campaign to make the lives of people with learning disabilities better. So we've done lots of campaigns. We've done the one we did previously was Don't Lock Us Away campaign, because too many people with learning disabilities would be locked away in care treatment units, and we wanted to reduce the amount of people being admitted and try and get more people to come out of these places and live within the community. And we sent lots of letters to MPs in the past and involved other groups, and in the end we ended up protesting outside both the NHS offices in London. That was back in before the pandemic in 2019.
I mean, that sounds quite exciting, having a protest as well. And what kind of response have you had from MPs that you've written to, or other people?
Well, for the We Can't Wait campaign, we wrote a letter about legal restraints as a unit in Matlock, and we sent a letter to all our Oxfordshire MPs and all MPs within a role in social care, and 3 MPs have responded, and one even asked a question in the House of Commons. That's
pretty impressive.
Which the government are going to take action on. Great.
I mean, that's a really good response. I know you mentioned the We Can't Wait campaign that you're working on at the moment. What's that about?
Well, we're tackling health inequality through waiting list reform and health and social care bodies and councils in Oxfordshire and Thames Valley first. Then we're going to move on to MPs and national organisations, and the waiting list reform, and make sure less people with a learning disability are dying before their time. And we've just got the campaign passed in the OCC, Oxfordshire County Council Adult Social Care Plan. And my next job is to get it passed on the new BOB, which is the Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and West Berkshire integrated care system.
Great. I mean, it sounds like you're really having quite a far reach on that campaign. And what's it about? Can you say a little bit more about why the We Can't Wait campaign is important?
Because people with learning disabilities are normally further down the waiting list, though, and more able-bodied people seem to get their treatment quicker. I think they think we're less important there, but we have more health conditions, which means we get ill a lot more. We get ill a lot more than probably other people, I would say, though. And any delay could actually lead to people with learning disabilities dying earlier, which has happened.
I mean, it sounds like a really important campaign, and I know you've had some good success already with the COVID vaccinations campaign. What was the issue that you were campaigning on there?
Well, we wanted people with learning disabilities to be prioritised for the COVID vaccine. I wanted them all to be put into the group 6, because I thought, why can't they do this? Because they did it in other parts of the country, like they've done it in Kent. And so now why not in Oxfordshire? So I spoke to the Oxford Mail, and I had a really good reaction from them, and also to the Press Association. I've talked to them, and they got all through the local papers in the country. I've been on BBC Radio Breakfast Oxford programme, and I even mentioned it on BBC South Today. So all during the summer and spring of 2020, and eventually most people got vaccinated about at the end of the winter, beginning of spring 2021.
That's great that you managed to kind of get that priority as a result of the campaign. Really important. And so just a final question. what advice would you give to other people who are trying to campaign on issues in their area?
Well, I'd say keep going and keep asking and don't give in. And if they in the end, they will have to listen to you eventually there. And it's just like keeping it going and going on and on and on, because this person's not going to go away, or this organisation's not going to give up on this. So we better do something about it.
I think that's great advice, just persistence and determination, definitely.
Yes, and wear them down.
Great, thank you, Ben. That's really useful.
Thank you.